Hey everybody, it's Missy
and April,
and we're here with our new podcast,
Sheela Na Gig. We're so glad that you could join us, and hello to all our beautiful Sheelas, and hello to whoever else is listening as well. We really appreciate you being here with us today. We are purveyors of women's stories and women's empowerment. And April, tell us, who is our Sheela of the day today?
Well, we have an amazing Sheela, but before I get to her, I got to take a little back step. Because in 1984, I was working at a nonprofit women's career center in Pasadena. And it was a dynamic, amazing center that got started in the 70s when women started going back to work in droves. And a lot of people think that women went back to work in the 70s for like fulfillment or because they wanted to make their own money. And I'm not saying women didn't, but a huge push behind that big movement to work in the 70s was a skyrocketing divorce rate.
Including my parents.
Right.
Yeah.
That happened in the 70s.
Yep. And women were burning their bras.
Women were burning their bras, and they were also extremely limited in their career options. There was something called occupational segregation, where women were limited to certain roles, and most of those roles were very low paying. And so suddenly there were federal dollars to help women acclimate to the workforce and get their bearings, and there was something called gender equity. Because what they figured out in the 70s was that from the 50s and 60s and 70s on, in high school, boys got to take shop classes like automotive and woodworking and all this other stuff that actually translated to employment.
Yeah.
And decent paying employment.
Right.
And women at the same time, guess what they were getting?
Home ec!
Yes!
We were learning how to sew and cook. I remember
cook.
I learned how to make a perfect omelet in home ec.
Exactly. Yep. But it wasn't like culinary art, so you can cook for an army and make a good living. No, it was how to cook for your family.
How to cook for your man.
Your man.
How to cook and sew for your man.
You got it. So here we go in the 70s, and women are poor. They are becoming single heads of households and having low per capita income.
It's just so sad. It's
really
so
sad.
fucked up. I mean,
I know.
Yeah. I mean, things are still a little fucked up with
don't get me started, girlfriend. We're not doing that because we're focused on our Sheela for today.
You're right. We're not going there. I do have a little story about that, but I'll wait. Okay.
All right. So where I was in 1984 was working at Women at Work and providing career counseling for single head of household women and helping them expand their occupational horizons and income potential. And it turns out...
That's so cool that you were doing that.
Oh, I loved it. It was a great...
How long were you there for?
I was there for a total of 7 years. I started out as a career counselor, and I ended as the associate director. And
oh my gosh! How old? You were young.
I wasn't that young. I was in my 30s.
Wow, that's so cool.
No, it was an awesome organization, and interestingly enough, it stayed around for about 25 years. And most of those women's career centers that opened up in the 70s, they were gone by the 90s.
Really?
Because the funding dried up. Somehow the general consensus was that women's employment issues were solved. Women were certainly representing 50% or higher of the workforce, but they were still at the bottom rung of earning potential.
And still are.
And there's still a gap, an earnings gap.
Yeah.
And that's another podcast for another
It is
Sheela.
another podcast for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. But my hero is Patsy Mink. And I'd never heard of Patsy Mink until I started researching for this podcast.
Wow. Patsy Mink, like M-I-N-K?
M-I-N-K.
Like the animal. Patsy
Mink.
I like the name Patsy.
She was born Patsy Matsu Takamoto. And she was born in Maui, Hawaii.
Oh, cool.
But she married Mr. Mink,
Okay.
who was a gemologist.
Okay.
But Patsy had a really interesting life, and she was very involved in the construction of Title IX. And Title IX was the funding source that led to my experience with the solo program at Women at Work.
Oh, cool. So it started with a woman.
It started with a group of women, Patsy being one of them, and a few good men also who helped craft this legislation. So Title IX was actually renamed the Patsy Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act upon her death in 2002 to commemorate not only her involvement in crafting the act, but also in strengthening it or attempting to not have it weakened, or after it was weakened to kind of bring it back as different administrations let that act tank and wane and then come back into a more forceful influence depending upon what era we're talking about.
Gotcha. So it was Title IX, but then after her death in 2002, it became known as the Patsy Mink Act.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the specific funding that I was involved with actually got abolished in, it was in the early 2000s, possibly before her death, when a California legislator just said, I don't like the term gender equity, and they pulled the funds that were allocated for California state or community colleges. They pulled that language, and that ended our funding.
What?
At Women at Work. Yep.
Insane. That's just so crazy.
I know. But Patsy Mink was quite an impressive Sheela. And she was born, actually, Patsy Matsu Takamoto, and she was born in Hawaii. And interestingly enough, she entered Maui High School the year before the attack on Japan that took us into World War II. Oh, wow. And despite a lot of local Japanese prejudice and Japanese Americans being treated like they were the enemy, she became the student body president in her senior year of high school. So in the midst of all of this discrimination against Japanese, she actually rose to this leadership position, and she was the first girl to serve as president of student body, and she graduated class valedictorian.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And I share this with you as just a little itty bitty slice of what a badass this lady really was in her life, and I can't believe I'd never heard of her until last week.
I haven't either. And it's so great. She was so young and so determined, and that's pretty awesome.
I know. Well, anyway, Patsy was mostly getting her college education in Hawaii, but she decided she wanted to go to the mainland for some of her education. And she her aspirations were to become a medical doctor. And she was apparently a very excellent student. So she ended up in the University of Nebraska. And the University of Nebraska had a long-standing tradition of segregation. And so non-white students had certain housing, and white students had dormitory housing that was separate. And our little...
what year was this?
This was in 1946.
46, and this was in Nebraska.
In Nebraska in 1946.
Wow.
And Patsy decided she wasn't cool with this segregation thing. She wasn't down with it.
Right.
So she got involved in a non-white students group because you couldn't be in a sorority that was for white people. So she was in the alternative sorority, and she took that group and challenged the university's segregation policy. And although her campaign was successful, unfortunately, Patsy herself got sick and had to finish out her college education back in Hawaii.
Oh, what a bummer.
Yep, but she did earn a bachelor's degree in zoology and chemistry, and she graduated at the top of her class, but guess how many medical schools took her?
Ugh.
0.
Oh my God.
0 was the number because...
So she wanted to be a doctor, but then she ended up going like a doctor for animals, like zoology?
No, she studied zoology and chemistry in preparation to go to medical school, but she was single-handedly turned down from every medical school she applied to because she was a woman. And part of that was World War II had ended and the guys were coming back, and we had all these veterans, and they took priority over a mere woman.
God.
But she decided to go to law school. And she applied to both Columbia University, who flatly rejected her a seat, but she was accepted from the University of Chicago Law School.
Yay.
And they only admitted her as a foreign student, even though she was a resident of Hawaii. I don't know how that worked.
That's weird, but at least they were able to get, bring her in that way, I guess. But
Yep,
a little strange. Okay.
She did get to go to law school, and that was kind of the goal. And she did have a hard time adjusting. She did face a lot of discrimination. But while she was playing bridge one night, she just happened to meet a dude by the name of John Francis Mink, who was a former U.S. Air Force navigator in World War II.
Okay.
And Mink was studying geology, and they both graduated. And against Patsy's parents'
wishes.
She married our friend
Mr. Mink.
Mr. Mink, and apparently they only knew each other for 6 months, and that might have been part of her parents' objections. But they got
like
married.
love at first sight.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. 6 months worth of looking and checking it out before you said I do.
Okay.
And guess what? She graduated with a law degree, and she couldn't find work as an attorney in Chicago.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it was that time in the world. I mean, as much as women still have issues today, it was really bad back then. So in 1952, she gave birth to her daughter Gwendolyn, who they called Wendy. And in that following August, they decided to move back to Hawaii, thinking that that Patsy's prospects as an attorney might get better. Guess what?
They didn't. It was worse.
It wasn't worse, but it wasn't any better. And while her husband got work right away, first thing that Patsy faced was not being able to qualify for taking the bar examination because the territorial law in Hawaii said that married women sort of took up the residencies of their husbands. And so she wasn't a Hawaiian citizen. And so once again, Patsy had to argue that case and take it on. And she challenged this ridiculous territorial law as being sexist, and she won.
What? Thank God. She
did.
She finally won. Oh my gosh. She must have been so vindicated after all of that.
She was so vindicated for 5 whole minutes because she took the bar, she passed the bar, and no law firm would hire her in the state of Hawaii because she was a woman.
She was a woman, and she had also challenged, right?
Yeah, she challenged her state, and she was a woman of color, although I guess in Hawaii, it's one of the, I think it's the only territory that I could think of in the United States at the time it was a territory where white people weren't the dominant culture. But with the help of her father, she established her own private law firm, and she taught law classes at the University of Hawaii to help supplement her income while she grew her legal business.
Yeah.
And she became the first Asian American woman to practice law in the Hawaiian Territory. And she mostly practiced criminal and family law because those were the type of cases that a lot of attorneys and a lot of firms avoided. But also at this time, our Patsy Hellion, I won't take no for an answer, Sheela.
Hellion.
Hellion.
I like that. She was a hellion.
Hellion. She founded Every Man organization, and it was a group that served as a hub for young Democrats on Oahu. And she was elected chairman of the territory-wide Young Democrats. And the following year, she ran for a seat in the Territorial House of Representatives, and she won.
She won again. Thank God. Things are turning around.
Yeah.
Are they turning around for Patsy?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me it gets better.
It
not
gets
worse.
better. No, it does get better. She became the
Patsy?
first.
What a fighter.
She was a fighter. She fought her whole life, and I think that's the point. She became the first Japanese American woman to serve in the territorial House, and there were a lot of firsts. She became the first woman from Hawaii elected to Congress,
Ooh.
and then the first woman of color elected to the House and she became the youngest member from the youngest state, as well as the first Japanese American woman member in Congress.
Go, Patsy.
So in 1964, when she ran for federal office and won the seat, she ended up serving a total of 24 years, although they were split in two. She began her tenure in the House in the early 60s.
Okay.
And then she took a little sabbatical for a few years. And between 1990 and her death in 2002, there we go, she finished out, or she served another term.
Wow.
Or I think it was more like 4 consecutive
And how many
terms.
kids did she have in total?
She only had her one daughter, Wendy.
Gwendolyn. Who was what? Wendy. Yeah, okay.
And maybe some of that, although I don't know this for sure, is that back in the day, mothers were really held back in their career.
Yeah.
And clearly Patsy had a lot to do. Now, I'm going to share some things that she did. And when I share these things, I want you to realize that for everything I tell you she did, there were about 4 more things that I'm not going to share with you.
Wow.
We'd be here literally
So we're
all day.
encouraging you to go look her up.
Absolutely. But she was very, very much involved in things like civil rights, and certainly women's rights and children's rights. And while she was serving in the House of Representatives, she was both on the Education and Labor Committees, and she was involved in a lot of comprehensive legislation for early childhood education, bilingual education, Head Start.
Oh, wow. Head Start. Wow, cool.
Yes, the school lunch program, special education, student loans, and she also got sabbaticals for teachers, and she really promoted things like adult education, Asian studies, career guidance programs, and vocational education.
Wow.
Which was, again, how I was impacted by some of her work.
Yeah.
She also, very interestingly, became the first person to oppose a Supreme Court nominee based on discrimination against women.
Ooh.
And this was during Nixon's era, and he was promoting Supreme Court nominee George Harold Carswell. Mm-hmm. And it was her testimony that she cited his refusal to hear a case that was brought by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal regarding one Ida Phillips employment discrimination case.
Wow.
It turns out Phillips was denied a position because she was a woman with children, and Mink's objection to this declination by this judge became the linchpin pin for Caswell not getting nominated or on the Supreme Court.
Wow.
So, like I said, she's a hellion, she's a badass, she's a Sheela.
A rebel. She's a rebel. She's a rebel. Yep.
So also frustrated by the rollbacks by the Nixon administration of a bunch of civil liberties and her opposition to the Vietnam War, Mink decided to enter the presidential race in 1971, hoping to become the Democratic Party's nominee.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
In 71?
In 71.
She sought to run for president
She
of the
did.
United States.
Yep. Now, as you can imagine, she was not successful in her bid.
Ugh.
But she did go on to co-author and advocated for the passage of Title IX Amendment to the Highest Education Act, prohibiting gender discrimination by federally funded institutions. And,
Amazing.
yeah, and guess what's even more amazing? Nixon signed it into law.
Yay! Yay, Tricky Dick!
Yes,
Tricky Dick
did
wasn't
that.
all bad, right?
Yeah, he had a few things on our side. And
Thank you, Tricky Dick.
Thank you, Tricky Dick. And also, she introduced the Women's Education Equity Act that allocated funds for promoting gender equity in high schools. And this is where we're talking about the uneven educational opportunities for boys and girls, boys getting really marketable skills to earn a job back then in the 60s and 70s, and women learning how to take care of their home.
Wait, I just want to interject. I have a quick story about that.
Please.
Growing up, I grew up outside of Detroit, and this family moved in across the street, and they were from California, so it was really crazy. Ooh, they're from California. They were Mormon. I didn't really know any Mormons. But they had this thing where the girls would go to this class, and I think it was called Mayan Maids, I think it was called. Yeah, or I think it was Maya Maids or Mayan Maids. And they would invite me to go with them. And the girls, like one of them was a couple years older and then one of them was like a year younger. And so I would always go with Lynn and Diane. I would go to their classes. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And we would go and we learned how to like make lasagna and we learned how to iron and we learned how to sew.
Maids take care of the house.
Yes, and we learned, but you know, these like my mom was like out burning her bra in the 70s. Like my mom was definitely not like your stereotypical like.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Did she know about Mayan maids?
Well, this is what happened. So like she knew I was going, but she didn't really know what it was. She was like, oh, good, you know, go ahead, go hang out with, you know, the Campbells. So I would go. And then I remember I had been going for maybe a month or two every Wednesday or whatever after school. And I come home. I said to my mom, you're not going to believe it. Guess what? They want me to become a Mayan maid. They've asked if I can join the church and become a Mayan maid. And my mom looks at me. She's like, no daughter of mine is going to be anybody's goddamn Mayan maid. You are not going back. And that was the last time I got to go.
Oh, well,
I know. It was kind of sad because like I didn't quite understand, but like I learned a lot about things that I would not really have learned about from my like non-domestic, you know, liberal bra-burning mother. So it was kind of appealing at that time, but I didn't really realize what was going on.
Yeah, it's kind of mixing this message here.
Yeah, exactly.
It was sad that you didn't get to go be with your friends and have fun. But on the other hand, your mom was really trying to say, you don't need to go learn how to take care of other people.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that was always her thing. Like, you know, never be beholden to any man. You know, all her little messages.
Well, speaking of that, returning to our Sheela.
Yes, sorry.
No, I love that story. Mayan maid. I'll have to remember that. Yeah. Mink also was involved in crafting the Equal Credit Opportunity Act.
Equal credit.
And that was when women actually got the right to have a credit card that wasn't in the name of her husband.
Oh my God. And again, can you like tell me around what year this is? Not exactly, but around.
This was exactly in 1972.
God, it was 72 before like women could have their own credit card?
And my mother famously talks about the first time she got a credit card that said Rosalind Braverman and not Mrs. Alvin Jack Braverman.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like I knew that was a thing, but I didn't realize it was like not until 72 that a woman could have her own credit card in her name.
That's why this is our badass Sheela.
Insane. That is crazy.
She also worked on legislation to abolish housing discrimination based on marital status.
So like it would be hard as a single woman to buy a house, for instance.
To buy a house or even rent a place.
Oh my God.
And in 1973, she offered and introduced the Equal Rights for Women's Act, which never made it out of committee. Needless to say, she supported the ratification later on of the Equal Rights Amendment. Also in 72, there were a lot of efforts to get rid of the, with regard to Title IX, specifically trying different ways to not have the schools equally fund male and female sports. Ugh. And so somebody raised what was called the Casey Amendment. And the amendment proposed allowing schools themselves, each school individually, to determine whether they would provide equal funding for both men and women's sporting activities. And the exemption was struck from the Senate version of the appropriation bill. And in the House, although Mink had lobbied really hard against that amendment, just before the vote, she had to run to New York in an emergency because her daughter was involved in a serious car accident.
Oh, no.
And her daughter ended up being okay, but while she was gone, she missed the vote. And the Casey Amendment was supported in a vote of 211 to 212. Oh. So they were able to railroad that through with one vote. But I have the silver lining.
All right.
When she came back after her daughter was okay, a colleague of her by the name of Carl Albert, a dude from Oklahoma, insisted along with a couple of other members in the House to re-vote because of the circumstances.
Aww, go Carl.
Yeah.
Go Carl. I love Carl.
Right?
Yeah.
He wanted Patsy to vote, and on July 17th, the members re-voted with a 215 in favor and 278 against, and the Casey Amendment was rejected, and that held all schools accountable to providing equal athletic opportunities for both men and women.
Thank God, because given the choice, what if you had, a male chauvinist pig.
Well, imagine.
Well, isn't that funny? I just remember that term. It just came to the top of my head. That's from the 70s.
That is from the 70s.
Male chauvinist pig.
Yeah.
Like that's what you would call a man who was a chauvinist. Yeah.
Right? And, when it came to sports, that was where a lot of that machismo preference came from. You know, males' sports were really important, and women's sports were very tangential and not important. And I would say that's probably still true today.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, in 1976, Mink gave up her seat in Congress because she wanted to run for United States Senate, and there was a vacancy by retiring Senator Haram Fong. And unfortunately, she lost the primary election for the Senate in Hawaii. But Jimmy Carter, who was president at the time, appointed Mink as the Secretary of State for Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs.
Go Jimmy Carter.
I know. And although I didn't really talk much about Mink's interest in the environment and environmental protections, she was very, very interested in that. And so she served in that role from March 77 to May 78.
Wow.
After which time she accepted a position as president of the Americans for Democratic Action in Washington, D.C., and she was the first woman to head the national organization, and she served 3 consecutive one-year terms, returning to Honolulu to be elected. She subsequently was reelected 6 times. And during that first year that she was elected, she opposed the Senate Supreme Court nominee by the name of Clarence Thomas. And when the Senate Judiciary Committee initially denied Anita Hill from the opportunity to give testimony, Mink, with some other congresswomen, including Barbara Boxer and Pat Schroeder of Colorado, Boxer, of course, is from California, they marched to the Capitol to protest the decision, and their protest was carried on the front page of the New York Times, and guess what? Hill testified.
I remember that.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So in her second tenure as a House member, Mink worked to revive the protections for socioeconomic programs that she had initially acted in her first 6 terms, so many years earlier. And she co-sponsored the Gender Equity Act of 1993. She pressed for universal health care and introduced a bill to protect, get this, reproductive decisions as an individual right. Wow. She worked on legislation.
What a pioneer.
I know, she really was. She was at the forefront, and women owe her a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, and here I've never heard of her.
She worked on legislation regarding displaced homemakers, minimum wage increases, occupational safety, of course, pay inequity, and violence against women.
Dang, Patsy, we love you.
I know. She was really an amazing woman, and she passed away on August 30th, 2002, due to complications of chickenpox, of all things.
Oh, wow. That's weird.
And she was at the age of 74. But what was interesting, speaking about political parties and things like that, in the recognition of the national mourning of her death, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld ordered all flags at military institutions lowered at half-staff in her honor.
Aww.
Mink received a national memorial and was honored with a state funeral that was held on October 4th at the Hawaiian State Capitol Rotunda. And it was attended by leaders and members of Congress. Women's groups honored Mink all over the world, and they formed a human lei of approximately 900 women who surrounded the tent where Mink's casket stood at the Capitol atrium while they sang Hawaiian songs. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful. That's so sweet.
And she was buried at the National Memorial Center in the Pacific near the Punch Bowl Crater. And Mink's death occurred 1 week after she won the 2002 primary election, too late, obviously, to serve another term in the Congress. But she was elected.
Oh, yes. That's so good.
The last thing I just want to say is that in 2002, Congress, as I mentioned, renamed Title IX amendment to the Higher Education Act, which Mink had co-sponsored as the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. And all I could say is I know without even knowing who she was, she impacted my life. And she impacted the lives of millions of women and men and children through all of her work.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Did you look into her daughter at all? Like what's her daughter doing now? Do we know?
Her daughter actually went into education. I know she's an educator, and I'm going to have to follow up on a next Sheela with a little postscript about Gwendolyn.
Oh my gosh. But can you imagine if that was your mom?
That was inspiring. I mean, I had a pretty cool mom, and nothing to dish on my mom, but Patsy Mink was a real incredible trailblazer, courageous woman. And again, it's not like she came from privilege or had it easy.
No, I mean, that's the thing. All this time she was knocked down, and that she continued to rise up and try again and try different things. And, she would not be silenced.
Right.
Which was amazing. What about her husband, her hubby?
I don't know much about him. He worked steadily.
They remained together.
They remained together, as far as I could see.
Behind every great woman is a really cool dude.
A really cool dude.
Yeah.
And who knew? Because they only knew each other 6 months when they got hitched, and apparently it worked out.
Oh, that's so great.
Unless I find out it didn't.
Well, I would imagine she was pretty insightful and intelligent. And, she doesn't seem like somebody that would make ill decisions.
Yeah.
She seemed like she had a good compass.
Oh, definitely.
So I would imagine, for somebody else maybe who knew somebody for 6 months, but come on, we're talking about Patsy Mink here. We're talking about Patsy Mink, she knows her shit.
She knows her shit.
Yeah, she's got a good compass. So and especially maybe I know that now that we've heard the story too. So it's nice that they stayed together, but I'm not surprised they stayed together. That's really good. Oh my God, that's so cool, April. Yeah. I love that.
It jumped out at me when I was looking for my next Sheela because of how much gender equity in Title IX meant to the work that I was involved in doing, and the impact that I know it had on so many women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was. Yeah, that's amazing. I want to go look her up now too. I hope everybody goes, when you hear about these women, you might want to go read up, yourself. I'm sure there's a book about her or 2 or 3, and obviously information on the internet. But I'm really intrigued. I want to know more. And we want you to feel that way. After you listen to our show, we want you to feel I want to know more. I want to investigate this on my own. So go check out Ms. Patsy Mink. I wonder if she was friends with Gloria Steinem.
I know that she partnered with Bella Abzug. That's for sure. So she was with.
They're running in some of those same circles.
Yeah,
probably
they
then.
were.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. In fact, that's how she lost her bid for president back. I think it was 1972 or. It was in the 1970s because she and Bella had went to see a prime minister of Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and that was really criticized by the Democratic Party, and that's how she lost that primary. So she and Bella got into a little bit of trouble.
Ooh. Well, it's you got to get in a little
bit of trouble, right?
Yeah. What is it? Eleanor Roosevelt says we don't know women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we get in some hot water.
I love that.
I love that too, right? Because so she went and got a little hot water.
She did.
Sometimes you got to do that. Yeah. You and I are good at getting into hot water.
We are.
Since we have a little bit more time, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of mention somebody, and she's not necessarily unrecognized, although. Maybe somewhat, but one of my favorite products is Poo-Pourri.
Poo-Pourri. Who would have known?
Do you know what Poo-Pourri is?
That's the stuff you stick in the drawer and it's smelly?
Not exactly. It's actually called Poo, P-O-O, Pourri.
Pourri.
Okay, so it's not like potpourri.
Oh, is that what I'm thinking of?
Yeah, it's like Poo-Pourri.
Who knew? What's Poo-Pourri?
So I always carry it in my purse. I have some in my purse right now. Mm-hmm. Because, say you're in a public place and you just have to, you gotta make a poopy.
Use the restroom, yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And you're just gonna be so glad to have that little poo-pourri with you.
Yeah.
And you just spray it into the toilet.
Okay.
And then it kind
of... So you don't embarrass yourself when you come out and stink everything up.
Exactly. Oh my God, speaking of yesterday.
Yes. What happened?
I was at the credit union.
Yeah.
In Pasadena.
Credit union, Pasadena.
You know who you are. No, and
Did somebody need some poo-pourri?
Yeah. Well, thank God I had it with me.
Oh, okay.
It was rough. It was a dude. He was like maybe in his 20s. And I saw the look of horror on his face as he kind of like came out and held the door open for me. Mm-hmm. I started gagging. That's how bad it was.
Well, I have a contradictory story in Pasadena, interestingly enough.
A poopy story?
Yeah, a poopy story. So I was working at a wonderful nonprofit organization called Women at Work. It was a women's career center. And there was one public restroom that everyone used. And I went in there and I stunk it up, and I came out and a woman was waiting to go in, and I was mortified, just what you were saying. I said, "I'm so sorry, it smells in there." And she looked at me like I was out of my mind. And she said, "Girl, that's what a bathroom's for." And that really stuck with me. And my husband could be a little weird about smelly bathrooms.
Girl, that's what a bathroom's for.
Come on, that is what if we can't do it there, where the heck are we supposed to do it?
It is true. That is really funny, April.
So, okay, I get you have this product. I could probably benefit from it.
So I'm glad, I'm right now
There's
I'm
the
spreading
counter
the word.
story.
There's something you didn't know about. Poopery.
Poopery.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't care to get it, that's what bathrooms are for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I love it because it comes in these very small little things. You just stick it in your purse and you just kind of, and it's interesting. Like I said, you kind of spray it into the toilet and then it goes into the water and then it kind of, yeah. And anyway, and the other thing I'll say is they make a really good dog spray too. Oh. Yeah, like if you have like pet odors, I should say.
Pet odors, yeah.
They make a poopery also makes it really good. I love
and it doesn't bother the pet.
No, and I really love it. And so because I love the product so much, I had to do a little research.
Yeah.
Like I'm just a little research obsessed these days, and I knew it was a woman who created it. Uh-huh. Her name is Susie Batiz. And in 2006, this is good, at an all too intimate dinner party, someone blew up the one and only bathroom, right?
Of course.
So this is the moment when Susie Batiz saw a solution to a common problem. Poop happens, and it stinks, right?
Right.
Even if it is, where you're
supposed to do it, right?
Okay, so she thought to herself, what if there was like some kind of natural product that could trap bathroom odor beneath the water surface, removing the number one problem with going number two? Okay.
Well, I'm not against it.
No.
Go for it.
So suddenly she was like, what if, right?
What if?
Because, there's sprays and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't always really work, and you just spray it into the air.
And sometimes they smell worse than the poop.
Sometimes they do, right?
They mingle with the smell of the poop, and the combined smell is worse than the original smell.
Right. Did you know that we'd be talking about poop today? By the way, if you were really inspired from the last story and you just feel like we've digressed a little too much, you're welcome to, just tune in next time. Because we are talking about poop here. Anyway, but after 9 months of mixing, testing, pooping, researching, and pooping some more, finally, Susie had figured out how to take the smell out of shit.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right.
And it started with a conversation, removing the taboo over something that we all do, but we don't like to talk about, right? But the thing about it, there's just so much more to her story, which again, I get so excited by this. So she really had kind of an uphill battle. She was always kind of an entrepreneur her whole life, right? Mm-hmm. And she had owned a tanning salon. She had a bridal store, a clothing shop, and she had a staffing business as well.
Why do all of your Sheelas always have such complicated careers?
They're hustlers like me, April.
Did you notice?
It's true.
All of Mrs. Sheelas have like 18 occupations.
I know.
Each one could have been its own, but no. Let's shove another
And she
one
was
in
also
there.
a rocket scientist. I'm lying. Okay. But anyway, she, I'm a hustler, but I'm not allowed to use the word hustler. April doesn't let me use that anymore. I'm not a hustler. I'm an entrepreneur. Okay. Yeah. So she also bejeweled sweatsuits and designed denim high heels.
Okay.
She sold exercise equipment, sold lingerie, bought homes, sold homes.
This year, yeah.
And at certain homes.
And she ran for president.
No, April, at certain points in her life, she was homeless.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Isn't
Being
that
entrepreneurial?
Yeah, she was like.
Well, I guess you have your ups and downs.
Like she would, but she never let anybody know. She would be like living in her car and then doing all these things. So she would put on this facade because she was always like just bubbling with like ideas. That was her thing, right?
Yeah.
So. She was 55.
Yes.
A year younger than me.
Uh-huh.
And, she was no stranger at that point to the struggle of entrepreneurship. And of course, with, a myriad of businesses that had failed. And, she had filed bankruptcy twice.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. But after some deep introspection, she realized what was holding her back. And she realized that she was just...
smell of poop.
Yeah, exactly. The smell of her poop was holding her back. No, she realized she was just too focused on making money.
Ah.
She's like, all I think about is like, oh my God, I have the next idea. It's going to make me money. It's going to be awesome. This is the one. This is the one. And so, fast forward several years later to 2005, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she decided, you know what? I'm swearing off business. I am going on a spiritual sabbatical. And I'm done. I'm done with all these crazy business ideas. I'm not going to think about money. I'm just going to get myself to a better space. And that's kind of what she decided at that point. Of course, this brings me to the dinner party. Shortly thereafter, she had made this decision. She's at the dinner party with her brother-in-law. Uh-huh. And
he was the offender.
Yeah, and I don't know if he was the offender. She didn't mention that. It's possible.
Yeah.
But they did start to talk about the smell in the bathroom. And he asked her, can bathroom odor be trapped? And she started to really think about this. And she was familiar with the concept of like essential oils. And she knew how to create a product that, locked odor below the surface of the toilet water. She was like, wait a second, I know how I can do this. And so she's quoted as saying, I felt like a zing up my left arm and the front of my leg. It was just like the lights came on brighter. And I was like, I can do this. And so Poopery was born. Poopery.
Ooh.
And so what started as a simple idea at a dinner party has turned into a nationally recognized company valued at $400 million.
Wow. I love that's what happens when you stop thinking about how to make money.
It's true. maybe
so
maybe I
great.
should try that.
We should all try that.
I know, right?
That's it.
And Susie herself is worth an estimated $240 million.
Woo.
And in 2019, she tied with Reese Witherspoon as Forbes' 2019 list of the richest self-made women in the U.S.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
All because of poo spray.
All because of poo spray.
I know.
And I poo-pooed the spray.
And I know. And again, her struggle hasn't been easy. Of this quick background, She grew up in Arkansas. She grew up poor. Her father was a bipolar alcoholic, while her mother was addicted to pain pills. Parents got divorced. Poor thing. She was molested by her stepfather.
Oh gosh.
I know. Terrible.
Doesn't end.
Terrible.
It's horrible.
She was married, bankrupt, and divorced by 20. At 21, she made a suicide attempt.
Oh,
I know. It's very sad. I mean,
very,
very sad. At 23, she had a baby and entered into an abusive marriage.
Oh.
And then she escaped that marriage. She was homeless with her 2 children before getting married for a second time. I mean, you hear stories like this. It's so harrowing, but that she continued to kind of like keep her head above water and persevere. I'm sure a lot, having those children really gave her a new perspective. Like, I must persevere, But she hustled again until she was 38. And then she filed for bankruptcy a second time. She fell into a deep depression. And she is thankful, though. She says she's thankful for all that time in her life because she had what she calls the luxury of losing everything.
The luxury of losing
And sometimes
everything.
that's what it takes. And after she says that she found success within her with her own being for the first time in life.
Wow.
So she just being, instead of hustling, making money. What's going to make me money? And she swore off business for good. And that's when this idea occurred to her. She was entering into this spiritual sabbatical, and And she said that, she's a self-proclaimed closet hippie, and she had been experimenting with essential oils for decades. And, again, came up with this secret formula. And, of course, everybody thought it was insane. They're like,
Right.
Wait a second, you're making poo spray? Like, you're making poo spray, and you think this is going to... And she didn't think it was going to make... She just like, no, I just know this is a problem. And this is
just trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, and this is something I can do, and I know exactly how to do it. So, for those of you who don't know about Poopery, go get some. Go look it up. It's the best product. I love it so much. I love it. And this is how it works, by the way. Before you go poopy, you spray the product into the toilet bowl.
Oh.
And it creates a film on the surface of the water, and that film traps the odor.
So what if you go and you don't anticipate having a big one?
It will still work. I've had this
Thank
happen.
you.
I've had this happen. It will still, yeah. And you know, one time my daughter threw up on a plane, and I had my poopery with me, and it was terrible. People were like all gagging, but I grabbed my poopery and I just started spraying.
Poopery toilet sprays. Wow, before you go, toilet sprays. I'm looking this up on Google as we do this.
Okay, see?
Yep.
And it smells so good, by the way. It smells really, I'll let you smell
Well, it
it.
says meet the best smellers. And this is very reasonably priced.
It is very reasonably priced. It is. And again, for those of you who have pets, it is the best at eliminating pet odor too. And
you could buy 4 and get 1 free.
oh my, I gotta get on there. I'm so glad you said that. And you know, it started. I just say it started really small. Like she started at like her friend had a gift store in Dallas, and then it just grew out of word of mouth.
Wow.
Yeah, and she did $1 million in the first year.
I love it.
With poop spray. Yeah, I'm not even kidding.
And it's available on Amazon.
Yeah, the company has sold over $300 million in product.
That's amazing.
And she says what she's most proud of isn't, of course, her wild financial success, but rather that her company has helped people talk about a taboo topic and has helped fix a taboo topic. Right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I can't believe you didn't know about poopery.
I had no idea, but I'm going to order it right now for my husband because he's always complaining about...
Oh my God, you're ordering it. You're ordering
Right?
for Steven.
Yes, we
Steven,
see it.
right now. April is, I'm glad you're listening to this podcast.
No.
April tells us, Steven, that you really need this. So,
Well, no, the truth is that he is very sensitive to smells, and he's always complaining, and I'm always telling him what that woman said to me. That's what bathrooms are for. But if we have a very good product, why not?
yeah.
I love this. This was a favorite. I love this.
See, I'm glad. So this is just like, I guess this is more of like an enlightenment as opposed to like, you know, giving somebody credit because obviously she's recognized by Forbes magazine. She's getting some credit, which is
She's
great.
getting
Which is
yeah.
great. But, you know, people still might not know about it. And I love the fact that she's so self-made. You know what I mean? She suffered.
Right.
She suffered through so much. And here she was like, you know, my age by the time this product hit the market, you know? I mean, I think it's great. And it gives me hope too. You know, who knows, maybe I will discover my poopery soon. Maybe I will.
We hope so.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, keep listening. I'm sorry if we offended you with poop talk. So when I was in my band, we were doing photos up in Topanga Canyon. And I remember we were coming back from the photo shoot. It was kind of late at night, and we were driving back through Encino, and we were starving, and we saw this like little Italian restaurant. And I was like, oh, they look like they're still open. Let's stop. So we walk in the front door. This guy kind of walks out from the back, and we're standing there, and he goes, oh, sorry, you guys were closed. And then all of a sudden he goes, Missy? And I look, and it's this guy I went to college with in Detroit.
Oh,
that
funny.
I hadn't seen
Wow.
since college, right? He's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh my God. You know, we had this great, and then without, like, just like there was like a beat, and he goes, does she still love to talk about poop? Does she still have a million poop stories? And my band just started laughing, and they were like, oh my God. Yes, she has, I don't know what it is. I have a lot of poop stories.
Just
I do.
in case anybody's wondering, this is not the first poop story I have heard.
I know.
Missy and I have been friends for a few years now, and yeah,
I'm a little poop obsessed.
She
It's
is a
true.
little poop obsessed. But on that poopy note,
Yeah, sorry.
Can we say goodbye?
On that poopy note, we're going to say goodbye. I'm sorry, I just had to throw it in. Thank you for listeing. We hope you'll be back despite our little bit of a crass topic today.
And with
it
a
started out
solution.
so good with April. I'm sorry. But thank you for listening. We so appreciate your support. Share your Sheelas with us, and please keep listening.
Yes, please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Sheela Na Gig, unabashed.